A number of children have been unable to go to school in KwaZulu-Natal over the last week, either because their school has been damaged by the floods or because they simply can't access the premises. Earlier this week, the Education Minister, eNCA, inspected some schools in the province. She says a plan will be in place by tomorrow to ensure that all children get access to education during this time. Well, the Education Department's Mhlanga joins me now to take that conversation forward. Just before we get to the way forward, Elijah, in terms of schooling from tomorrow, let's start with the extent of the damage. Just remind us once again the extent of the damage. We're dealing with various pieces of infrastructure being damaged: road, rail, electricity, water, etc., social infrastructure, health and education. Just remind us of what you found when you did the assessment and the scale of the disaster that you are dealing with, specifically as it relates to the Department of Education and its facilities.
Good afternoon to Leslie. Thank you so much. Well, we still stand at 630 schools which were affected in the province. 124 of them suffered serious damage. And initially we had 101 schools which were not accessible. Now we have 72, which means the Department of Transport and other agencies of state and other people who are assisting us have worked hard to clear the roads where schools were not affected. So that's where we are, but we are still worried that we have 64 learners who have been confirmed to have passed away. And as you know, the Premier just said just under an hour ago that 54 people are still missing, and among them we have children. And in our records, there are 5 children that are still missing, but we know it could be many more because some of them were not necessarily in school, they were in ECD centers, and we are monitoring those as well. So there's huge damage in terms of human cost, but also damage in terms of infrastructure, as we indicated.
So within that context then, Elijah, you do mention that there's some progress, for example, around the area of schools that were not accessible. You've made some progress, but it does signal that, it's not complete restoration of access in terms of, some of the functions don't even lie within your department. For example, if a road has been damaged, if a bridge has been swept away by the floods, some of that is not within your department's domain. But overall, in terms of the plan to have as much of schooling restored by tomorrow as possible, how's that progressing?
Well, it's progressing well, albeit slowly, because we are seeing now an increase in attendance by learners and teachers. This week, by Friday, we're at 90% in the affected areas, which means people are slowly going back to work. There's still fear and trauma, and the rains that are still coming down in some parts of KZN are not making it easy. So some roads are still not accessible, but we are seeing an increase in the number of people who are now going back to school. And we've urged our school principals to open all the schools that they can open, even where the school is not fully accessible, but they must go there so that they can tell us the extent of the work that is required for us to factor that in when we do our planning. So there is progress. Come tomorrow, we think that there will be a lot more people going back, especially because we also advised our school principals to allow children, whether they're wearing uniform or not, to report at school so that we can account for them and give them the assistance that they need. What we are doing now is also to focus on learners who are still accommodated in community halls. We've got halls in Umlazi, in Tuzuma, KwaMashu, and other places where we are also taking care of them. We've been giving them books, we've been giving them food as well, shelter, and the matrics as well. They continue to study even under those difficult circumstances. So everyone understands the urgency of trying to restore education services, but we're also understanding the fact that we need to work with our partners to try and reach out to these children wherever they are so that we are able to give them the support and assistance that they require.
And I imagine that this has required that you procure a lot of temporary infrastructure to install. How's that going? Also keeping in mind that some of the work in some instances, I know that, for instance, in a province like Gauteng, some of that work would probably be the responsibility of the Department of Infrastructure Development, that collaboration and coordination of ensuring that where you need temporary infrastructure, that's brought into place. How's that going?
No, that is going well. In fact, the MEC instructed that deliveries need to commence as soon as possible, even by this weekend, which means today, tomorrow onwards, because all the purchase orders were signed on Friday for all the appointed service providers. We are procuring about 96 mobile classrooms to be taken to those schools where classrooms have been damaged. So that work is currently ongoing, and this week we'll be seeing the deliveries taking place in the different parts that are affected. But of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in schools that are not accessible because the structure is completely obliterated. So in that situation, we also need to look at things differently. But there are also other schools which have been affected, and it's now a danger, although it looks like it's standing. But our built environment professionals advise that no one should access those schools. So it's a lot of work that is continuing. We have even created categories to say extensive damage, moderate damage, where the district offices can work, and of course, the minor damages where it's windows and other things, where the school itself, through the allocation that we have given them, they can start the fixing. So everyone must do what it's supposed to do to make sure that the infrastructure component in this disaster is attended to, so that we can begin to accommodate the people that need accommodation, especially where we can find a quick solution for teaching and learning to continue. We are also starting to look at learning losses. What does it mean? What can we do? All those plans. In fact, we are currently in a meeting, even as we speak. I had to step outside of that meeting so that I can be with you. But we are currently discussing such plans. We want to make sure that we get back on track as quickly as possible.
That's an important one, is it not, Elijah? Because as you mentioned the word learning losses, it might sound technical, but basically it's something that every parent, every South African should be concerned about, particularly coming in the context in which we've had these disruptions to ordinary, normal schooling over the last 2 years, and then compounded by what happened, the riots and the violence that happened in July last year, and now this.
No, you are correct. It's actually a technical question, because learning losses is not quantified in terms of days lost or days missed away from school where disruptions took place. You also look at the psychosocial state of the teachers as well as the learners. The fact that they're in school does not mean that learning is taking place, but being in school is the first step. That's why we have brought in a lot of support from Social Development Department and other NGOs who play in the psychosocial space to help us, because it's not just curriculum, it's not just about teaching and learning and having teachers in class. It's about doing that effectively, making sure that the learners have everything that they need and that they are able to focus. One of the ways of ensuring that it takes place is to make sure that they have the basic services. That's why we appreciate the gestures such as the one from SATU, who are collecting a lot of items, blankets, sanitary pads, food items, which they are giving to the learners and other family members who are in these halls, so that we at least mitigate the impact of the disaster on our learners, so that they can begin to focus on education.
Very quickly, Elijah, the 5 pupils that are among the 54 people who are still unaccounted for, what do we know about them? Are they from one area, one region?
There's a family who are in Dassenhoek who are saying that there are 6 of their children who are still buried in the rubble that's there. They've been sitting there waiting for help to get their loved ones. We suspect that the majority of the 5 would come from that one family, but it could be a lot more children. What we are saying here is what we have been able to receive from the disaster management and emergency services people. So it could be from that area, but we think that the number could still be higher than just the 5.
All right. I've got to thank you for your time and your insights. Elijah Mhlanga speaks on behalf of the Department of Education. Really difficult conversation, really the devastation pixelating into focus every day as we think about the losses in terms of lives, as well as the infrastructure, as well as, other losses such as the damage that Elijah was talking about, psychosocial damage that has been caused by this flooding.